All right, so a little color theory. Color theory is the knowledge of effects and practical guidelines of the use of color in art. Color has huge psychological implications in the composition. Okay, so I'm just gonna talk a little bit about how we define colors, and then we'll talk about things a little bit afterwards. Okay, so primary colors, these are basically the colors that can't be made by mixing other colors. So, for instance, if you want to make orange, you mix red and yellow, right? But how do you make yellow? You can't do it. Now, that's when we think traditionally, like with your crayons in elementary school. If you actually look, we do RGB when it's on the computer because it's an emissive display, which basically means that it projects the light out. Remember how you took your little prism and then you put white on it, white light, and then it would turn into a rainbow. And if you took a rainbow, it would put them all together and make white light. That's how this works, as opposed to when you do a drawing on a piece of paper or ink or you print something out, the light hits it, it gets absorbed by it. It's not emitting light. It's absorbing the light, and whatever's left over is what you see, right? So think about, like, you wear a black shirt, right? And it's really dark, or I'm sorry, it'll be really warm out in the sunlight, but if you wear a white shirt, you'll be cooler. Same basic concept. Anyway, so like to make yellow on a computer, would be basically red, RGB, red and green would give you yellow, I think. Some mixture between them. Okay, anyway, because it's red, green, blue. Those are your primary colors in there. So, but it kind of determines on, what you're working with anyway. So, those are your primary colors. This is just kind of your traditional whatever here. Because there's also CMYK, which would be cyan, magenta, yellow, and key plate, which is typically black. That's if you're printing stuff. Either, traditional printing, like using silk screening, or printing on your home computer. That's the other, version. So cyan's kind of like almost like a sky blue. It's like a light blue. Magenta is kind of like a pinkish red, and yellow's obviously yellow. So in this case, though, we have this red, yellow, and blue. So those are your primary colors. The secondary colors would be the colors that when you mix the two, right? So in this case, it would be green, orange, and purple. Makes sense. And tertiary colors are when you mix the primary color with a secondary color, you end up with a tertiary color. The only thing I would say about that is that when you describe them, this isn't purple blue, it's blue purple. And it would be red purple or whatever. Okay, so you say the secondary color first and you say the primary color first. You say the secondary color second and you say the primary color first when you describe tertiary colors. Now, there are a bunch of different color schemes that you'll generally see. There's even more than this because people just make stuff up as we go along. But what I do want to stress is that regardless of what you make your site, you should have a color scheme. It shouldn't just be willy-nilly, just throwing it wherever it feels like being. Okay? So, some that we have are monochromatic. It means with one color, and it's just tints and shades, light to dark, gradation of a single color. So in this case, we have red. I take this red here, and if we make it darker, it goes all the way to like basically black. And if you make it lighter, you get to pink and then white. Achromatic is without color, so it just means black and white. Pretty obvious. We have complementary color, which means you would take two colors that are opposite on the color wheel. So in this case, we have red and green, and it's generally kind of colors in that color range. Analogous colors are colors that are basically kitty corner to each other, and the range of them around. So if you take these three colors here, that would be an analogous color scheme. Okay, so they're next to each other. Generally speaking, this is the most harmonious, I would say. That has a little bit of interest to it. Obviously, like this is probably the most harmonious because everything's pretty much the same, and this would be second, this would be third. But this is kind of in the middle of the road, so analogous is usually a pretty good color scheme to go with. Complementary color is really good for making things pop. So you'll see it like in sports and with logo designs and things like that because they're trying to make them stand out. But they're not generally good for like a holistic page layout. Typically, that's not the best idea. There's triadic. It's just ugly. Basically, you take three opposite colors, and you that's what you would use. But it looks terrible, so don't use that one. There's also split complementary, which is like complementary, but you have one primary color, and then you take two on the opposite end, but not the direct opposite. So you wouldn't use green. I would use green yellow and green blue to create you know, those, and then it would be a split between those. And that would be a split complementary color. And there's more than these as well, but just be aware that there are color schemes, and you should probably try to utilize those. One of the things that you want to do is try to decide on a color palette and then stick to it. So just like with your fonts, you want to typically stick to, you know, 2 to 3, maybe 4 fonts, kind of depends on what you're doing. Same thing with color. You kind of want to stick with, you know, 2 to 3, maybe 4 colors, and kind of stick to those and only those. It'll just make it consistent. It'll make it look a little bit nicer. If you go to all over the place, it will be it won't hold together. If you do too few, it'll be really boring. So some ways of finding colors is I use these here. So this first one's probably the best one. Adobe Color. You click on that, and what you can do is you can choose the kind of color scheme you want to use here. So they have, okay, right now I'm in Analogous, so I can move this guy around, and then I can actually shift these. Man, it's failing a lot here. I don't understand what's going on. You can actually shift these, and it will give you these colors, and you can see the RGB and the hex here of each one of these, and then you can use these in your site. So, you know, I could kind of play around, but no matter what, these colors will always work together. You can see I can shift these around, but it knows to move the other colors about in order for them to work together. And they have other ones, so monochromatic is kind of boring. Triad, so you can see, it doesn't look as terrible as I would have thought, but like, so here's Triad, and Compound, I never use Compound, Shades, so see, you kind of have to choose one color, and then it'll give you basically tints and shades. And you can try that. The other thing that's really cool is that, let's say you have a picture that's like the main thing of your site that you really like, that you want to use. You click on Import Image, and you can import an image, and what it'll do is, I'll just grab something. So let's say, do I have anything in here that's not terrible looking? The answer is no. Wait, here we go. I'm going to use a picture. So let's say I want to use that image. What it'll do is it'll actually create a color scheme based off that picture. You can see they actually work pretty well. And you can still move these around and sample them if you want to change, although it doesn't seem to dynamically really adjust the other ones. Let's see, bright and muted and deep. But you can play around with that, and it will actually give you colors based off of that. So that works pretty well. Or even if you find like a shoe design, or, you know, the logo or something you really like, you could bring it in here and kind of use that as your starting point, which is pretty cool. So anyway, I would definitely think about utilizing those items. All right. The next thing to do after this is your assignment. So what you want to do is basically use Bootstrap to produce the home page layout. The home page is the most important page because this next assignment is obviously going to be a multi-page site. So you have to have a main page and then 2 subpages. The home page is basically you're gonna make that page, and you'll duplicate it to make the other ones, and then you'll change them. But you want to use Bootstrap. So kind of like I showed you up earlier there, and also in this video down here, or these videos. Basically, you're just going to create a layout of your Bootstrap site using your previous image file as a guide. Okay, so you'll put your text in. You'll put dummy text in there. You'll put placeholder images in there. You know, you'll add some Bootstrap components. Make sure you utilize the Bootstrap layout stuff, and then generally that it follows the normal structure, so everything works appropriately. All right. If you have any questions or whatever, just email me. All right. That's it. Good luck.